introduce Lucimara Letelier. Lucimara is the founder and director of RegeneraMuseu, which is an organization fostering sustainable practices within museums and culture to champion climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience in Brazil and internationally. You've got some amazing international credentials as well. And you are also the ICOM Sustain Vice Chair. ICOM Sustain is the international committee, one of 32 international committees for ICOM. And Lucimara is our first keynote speaker. She's traveled from Brazil to be here with us today. And after her keynote, Lucimara will then also chair the panel discussion which constitutes the first session. Thank you, Lucimara.
Hello, everyone. So wonderful to be here. Some of you may have traveled like me from Brazil last night, so bear with me, just a little bit jet lag, but here I am. Let me just get this down a little bit. Okay, so good morning, everyone. And I seek permission to come to this territory, and both from those who came before me to this place, and also the thinkers and doers of regeneration that are not here in the room today, but we are also claiming and bringing them to be here with us. I may not speak English perfectly, but today I will try to speak with you the regenerative thinking language, and I hope I can do my best to bring you to this speed and to learn together what does it mean. I want to express my gratitude first. It has been a wonderful opportunity to work with this conference and being part of the organizing committee. And I'm pleased and also that my research that I developed in the UK about this topic has been integrated to this program and brings such a relevant diversity as well. So let me just try to move this. And a special thanks to Christian Bass and from ICOM UK and from Catherine Simpson from the NNDC. I think they have been incredible partners through this journey. And also inviting RegeneraMuseu, the organization I created and founded in Brazil, because this legacy has also brought some relevant diversity here, but also contributed to bring regenerative thinking to be enhanced in the UK and elsewhere. To guide us through the conversation today, I have created a mind map. Everyone who asked me what regeneration is and how regenerative thinking applies to museum have questions. And I want you to picture a mind map on yourself because you can do your own journey. And you can do your own journey by following along with me this presentation, but also continue your research later. So to introduce myself, so let's go to this mind map together. I will use a regenerative framework. When we're talking about a regenerative self, we are looking to 3 lines of work. So as you can see there, the self would be me, it would be you, but then we need to think ourselves as a systematic self. What does it mean? How we engage with communities, how we are part of a bigger whole we serve. And keeping this in mind, I would like you to bring us some highlights of how my journey had contributed to come to this work today that I will present about regeneration. So yes, I have worked for museums. Like many of you also work, I worked for 25 years in different museums, NGOs, cultural institutions, and including being the Deputy Director for the Modern Art Museum in Brazil and the Deputy Director of Arts for the British Council in Brazil for 6 years. But it was over the past 8 to 10 years now that I have done my sustainability journey, my regeneration journey, and my climate leadership training. And I think it's important also, as Christian said, I'm an ICOM Sustain Vice Chair, and I welcome you all to see the members of ICOM Sustain who are here today. There are 6 members of ICOM Sustain, and you can meet them. But there are other key elements that brought me to be committed to this agenda as a full-time job. And the reason I think I commit to this is the force of nature. And I was very glad today that I came to this room and I can see the river, I can see the trees. We are not alone in this place. We are with nature. And if you want to learn how to design as nature, we need to mind that we're part of nature. So this is me in Eco Village. It's basically doing some learning and studies in deep knowledge about how nature has a full potential to teach us about permaculture, agroforestry, bioconstruction, and community life. And my role is to bring this back to the museum's field. So if you are interested, we can talk more about this. But there is a second reason why I'm also very responsible for being here. I feel connected to this territory. Regenerative thinking involves recognizing that our personal stories are connected to a greater whole of the history of the places. Right here in Liverpool, the International Slavery Museum tells the story of the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know if some African ancestors of mine have passed through those ships and arrived in Brazil in any sugarcane plantation. But I know our histories are connected. And if I know, I care and I commit. So, since 2017, I have created, as Christian has said, this organization that does consultancy and training to enhance regenerative thinking and sustainable practices for museums. It's called RegeneraMuseu. You can go there on site and Google it and learn more about it. But you can go to regenerativemuseums.com and learn about this research, not only through me, but through the voices that we interview. And today you're going to hear Esme and Jenny, they participated in this interview. But you can learn much more about how these findings has brought us about thinking on regenerative thinking for museums. Okay, so now I'm going to invite you to something that is a special invitation for a regenerative practice of inner self. So let me tell you, just changing the protocol a little bit. This is an object from Brazil. It's a Tupinambá object, it's a sacred object. It's called maracá. It was given to me when I was living in an eco-village. And the knowledge for indigenous people is the roots of regenerative thinking. And because we are in the world of material culture, and museums and collections and objects matter, I want to bring an object today with me. But I have an invitation for you. If you want to participate, that's fine. If you don't feel like it, that's okay as well. Since regeneration is about our inner self, I encourage you to close your eyes now. Again, it's an invitation. If you don't feel like it, that's fine. I want to take a moment for a breathe in and out. If you can see and feel your feet on the ground. And the invitation is to connect yourself to the center of the earth. Just feel it. Just feel it how it is to be connected to the center of earth. And you can also feel the connection with the top of your head to the transcendence. Whatever transcendence means to you. Now, within yourself, with your heart, reflect and feel. Why are you here? Where does regeneration lives within you? Can you and your work become seeds of regeneration? May we plant the seeds of hope for planetary regeneration through the work of museums. We can come back now, open our eyes slowly. We are here, we are present, we are together. This is just an exercise. And now when we go back to the cognitive thinking, what actually regeneration is. Okay, so lots of people ask about it, but is it ancestral knowledge? Right here, your body is regenerating your cells. It is a system rebirth invitation. It is putting life at the center of every decision. It is also bringing a correlation between people and place, and it's about healing. It's about holy. So lots of graphics will explain what regeneration is. You can search for them. You can look about how does it mean and how it has been applied to other fields. But I will focus today on this one. So I encourage you, because everyone asks, what is the difference between regenerative development and sustainable development? Well, sustainable development is part of the path. Sustainability is part of the equation, but it's not the end. We need to think about how we co-evolve from sustainable development and we go beyond that, and we start reversing the damage that humanity has created to us and to nature by proposing restoration and reconciliation. We cannot sustain a system or a planet that is exhausted in terms of its resources and in terms of extinction that we are happening and facing now. Right here in the UK, the Royal Society of Arts, they have done a wonderful work in terms of putting together these frameworks in the Regeneration Rising. I encourage you to look at the fact that we're moving to a extractive to a sustainable paradigm, and we need now to move to a regenerative paradigm. If you want to go deep into this, look at the authors. There are many authors and references you can look for. Regenerative thinking has been developed. And on my page, research, regenerativemuseums.com, there is a literature review, because I had to read all these books to develop the research. But I encourage you to choose one and pick one that is most interesting for you to understand what we're talking about. It's not just putting a word and changing sustainable for regenerative. It's going a little bit deeper in this journey. So when we look at the principles, tell me about what are the principles of regeneration. Regeneration is about living system principles. And some authors have systematized 7 principles that apply to all living forms, to nature, to your life, to human beings. And how do we apply this to projects? So if you look at today, you're going to see that regenerative thinking has been applied to fashion, economy, agriculture, and why not to museums? It's not that it has not been applied to museums, that we are missing literature. And I want to fill this gap, and I want to support this gap. The UK Climate Museum has produced and prepared frameworks and articles that are very relevant to this matter, and is included in the research as well. So the regenerative principles, if we look into how does it apply to museums, I cannot explain them all today, unfortunately. In the research, you can see it. But I have a look into how these principles apply to collections, to education, to curatorship, to museology. What if the essence of museums could meet the potential of places? And if we consider not only geographic location, but symbolic places, what if museums understand the full potential of their nestedness condition, which is a visitor, a museum, a place, a country, and a planet? How can we create a generation of regenerators? Look at the research, and you can go deeper into this. Frameworks. Yes, I know we have to do strategic planning, strategic thinking. I know we have to go through this. A lot of organizations are using regenerative frameworks to bring Earth and nature as a stakeholder, as you can see this year. It's not easy to bring ancestral principles and indigenous principles to modern society. But the authors have prepared and thinking about frameworks that can help you to design as nature and to think about how regenerative capabilities can be introduced to your projects if they are place-sourced. And then let's go to a core concept. Okay, if I need to think about one concept, regeneration is about the restoration of the conditions conducive to life. Why this is important? We are not talking about only buildings. Buildings are important, and sustainable buildings are part of the equation, but we need to think about this for sustaining lives. So if we look into regenerative museums now, how does it apply to museums? Well, the core concept in the museum field that I have been thinking through the research is that we need to create adaptive resilience in a world and social environment collapse. This is a possibility of repurposing the role of museums to focus on care for the people, their territories, and the planet. And most and above all, we want to bring life back and restore the vitality of the systems. Can we do this? Can we try to do this? If we look in more details, and as I said, the research is more than 100 pages, I summarize in 2 slides. What we're trying to do is to heal places, activate communities' biocultural wisdom, foster generation of regenerators, transform eco-anxiety into regenerative engagement. We want also to adopt an ecological perspective on decolonization and create reparations for ecocide and epistemicide and expose degenerative truths and tell regenerative stories, which you're going to see today, a lot of them. And what we are also looking to is rejecting the extractive growth model for museums management systems but also reimagine the future of restoring connection between humans and nature, which is the most important thing we should look at in your narratives and museums. Okay, so tell me about who is doing this. What museums are actually doing this? The research has lots of case studies. Some of them will be here today, right after in the panel, you're gonna see this. Wonderful case studies in this conference have been defined to help you to learn and to go through this. But the most important thing that I think is important to see, eco-museums, territorial museums, and community museums, they have always been regenerative. They were born regeneratively thinking. But the other museums, classical museums, urban museums, can they learn? Can they go through this path? Yes. And there are ways that you can transform your realities by doing this. So now that we have looked at all of this, regenerative leadership, this is a conversation with you. What should I do with all this? And regeneration will start only if you think it's important and you think we can do it. And that's why it's an invitation for
There's also a bit of worry in me that...
So I will pass through a video right now.
There's also a bit of worry in me that we can run the risk of doing what we have done with the field of sustainability to regeneration. And the process of becoming a regenerator is a lot different to what we have ever done before. It's about surrendering to not knowing, surrendering to not having all the answers, surrendering to being courageous and curious about the patterns and principles and forms and functions of living systems, the only system that has stood the test of time.
Yes, it's about uncertainty. Yes, it's about vulnerability. And you're going to hear from regenerative leaders today, their also way of thinking and how they have gone through those things. Why I need to care about this, why it's important, why it's urgent, why museums, why you, why me. I think I don't need to be here explaining to you about the climate and social collapse. I think we're all very much informed. And Ben was talking just now about thinking about future generations, about our children. So there is a situation of crisis and collapse that we are going to go through now, that we are living in. But we can also choose to think about that the size and the scale of this collapse makes society to believe that there's no future. And how do we plan and help them to think about a better future? And we can start now to picture this other possible future. So I invite you again to look at the indigenous and ancestral knowledge. For them, time is circular. Time is now. And if we are inspired by them, we can think about the fact that museums can help society to reimagine the future. By activating the regenerative lens now, we can perhaps transition society to a socio-ecological driven way of behaving, activate their hope, and we are here possibly bringing them to a different future in the present and helping them to picture this, anticipating actually this possible future. And I like this picture of round houses of indigenous people because Regenerative Museums for Sustainable Futures is thinking that the future is now, it's not there, and we're building now a possibility of being sustainable. So let's hear Daniel.
Maybe what we need to do when we work with time, is to pay attention to what a mentor of mine, Anthony Hodgson, has called the future potential of the present moment. And what I understand in this powerful notion of the future potential of the present moment is actually a fundamentally regenerative notion, which is, again, don't lose yourself in the abstract of talking about a potential future. Come into the specific of how everybody right now and how they are participating in this nested system that the museum can hold space for, this place nested. How are they contributing to either futuring or defuturing? How are they contributing to healing, sharing, caring, nurturing, protecting, reconnecting? Or are they continuing to contribute to separating, competing, exploiting, extracting, distancing?
So Daniel was one of my mentors in training. And he started the organization called Gaia Education, was trained in design and regeneration and sustainability and sustainable practices. I encourage you to listen to his video on the playlist that we created for the research on the big reflection of bioregionalism and bioculture as a way for us to build regenerative futures throughout museums. This is just a little piece to think about it. So your regenerative journey begins now. And for some of you, it began much earlier, but I invite you to join us and to hear what your heart is saying, your mind is saying today. I invite you to go to the playlist to think about and picture your mind map for a regenerative journey, for regenerative learning. And also, this is the page that I created for the research. You can have on your phone, there are 12 videos with people who have been reflecting about it, and you can hear these podcasts and videos when you are walking by. And there's a report you can download, the literature review, and you can also learn together how to regenerate throughout museums. I will read a final note here. My time has ended, but you have time to talk today and tomorrow on the corridors about this. Robert James, who some of you know from wonderful reflections about climate change, he has been a very good mentor throughout this process of the research. He has endorsed this research, and I will just read a final piece he sent. Not only must museums attend to their own sustainability and that of their communities, but they must also assume their role as stewards of more than human world. Too many museums have overlooked the meaning of interdependence in their work, and regenerative thinking is the bridge that enables a broad web of societal and ecological relationships to be recognized and to be nurtured. So thank you very much. So I hope you have enjoyed this conversation today. And without further ado, actually, we're going to go straight to the next item on our agenda, because the idea is to hear what our guest speakers have to say in terms of case studies. If you have enjoyed this presentation, I look forward to continue this. And the session 1 will feature an extraordinary encounter with 3 professionals leading organizations that have incorporated regenerative practices into their work, while they're also addressing climate change and social collapse. Please welcome to the stage Esme Ward, the director of the Manchester University Museum, and Jenny Newell, the curator for climate change at the Climate Solutions Center at the Australian Museum. And we'll have Richard Piaccentini with us online today. He's coming from the US, and he's the director of the Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Garden. Their biographies are on the program. I'm sure you can find it. The topic of this session is regenerative experiences in dialogue. How can museums create sustainable futures through regenerative design? And let me just come here to a different setting to join my colleagues. Thank you for coming here. So as I said, both Jenny and Esme, they have participated in this research, and we reflect a lot how their journey and their practices also resonate with regenerative leadership. And the 3 of them, they have created climate hubs in their organizations in different ways, in different forms. But the Climate 2 membership that Richard is leading, Esme organizing the redevelopment of the museum throughout your team with the top floor, and the Climate Solutions Center, the dialogue. Somehow they have interconnections. So today we are going to hear how these experiences can have inspirations for you on similar initiatives you can start on your locations. We'll start with Esme, then we move to the online presentation of Richard. We come back to Jenny, and please prepare your questions. We'll have questions at the end, and we'll be here for you to dialogue with them about these experiences. So starting with you, Esme.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to go up here. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lucimara. My head is spinning. I have lots of questions, and it's really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. So, have I got an image? Yes, great. Okay, so last Saturday morning at the Heart of Manchester Museum, we hosted a gathering of solidarity, ceremony and shared purpose with rainforest defenders from Sarawak and European allies, including activists, environmental charities, museum staff and the public. Together, we called for urgent action to protect Borneo's irreplaceable ecosystems and homelands and bore witness to the knowledge, leadership and actions of Indigenous land defenders. Central to this event was a lilling, a traditional folk song done in a circle, an expression of connection and collective presence. And it ended with the words spoken by us all, together, together, we move forwards together. I suppose what I really want to reflect on today is how Manchester Museum, part of the University of Manchester, is trying, not always succeeding, but ever trying, to centre relationships as it builds empathy and understanding for our world and each other towards a more sustainable world, and with an ethics of care that extends beyond collections to ideas, beliefs, relationships and places. From retail to programming, bins and light bulbs to carbon literacy, fundraising to conservation, our approach is probably best described as holistic. And I'm going to share two brief examples, stories really, that give a sense of the relational shift underway and that speak, we think, to regenerative thinking and practice. One is hyper-local in Manchester and the other is global. So we think this is a game changer. Well, at least it is for us. This is the top floor of the museum, which we've opened up to become an environmental action and social justice hub, home to more than 15 local environmental, educational and social justice charities that share our mission to build a more sustainable world. Two newly developed roles lead this work: a social justice manager, Chloe Cousins, and an environmental action manager, Hannah Hartley. And I'm delighted Hannah, who is one of the most knowledgeable folk in the museum around this work, Hannah's here today. Where are you, Hannah? Embarrassing you. Thank you. Hannah's here, so do chat to her if this is interesting to you. The top floor is an experiment to see how we might become the museum the city and its people need. It has a greenhouse, co-working hub, community space, seminar room and lounge for partners. Our website has a list of the charities, organisations we work with. You can see some here. It's the museum really using its convening power. And essentially, we're bringing people together to learn, support, build community and capacity, redistribute funding, make plans, and dream together. Why wouldn't we want to dream? So it's shaping the museum's work, like Touching Grass, and this is really in its infancy, focused on creating space for young people who don't feel represented by climate messaging and movements, as we help to build with others an intersectional youth climate movement in Greater Manchester. Our nearest neighbourhood, literally on our doorstep, called Ardwick, has seen over 65% of their green space taken for development in the past 3 years. A shared sense of loss and anger about this, about decreasing biodiversity and poor air quality, has driven our work with Ardwick Climate Action, a local grassroots organisation. From supporting road closures and helping them measure air quality levels, to tree planting, events, local walks, and using our herbarium collections to support the development of new green space. And in a fortnight, Silent Skies, curated by Ardwick Climate Action, opens in the museum. It's an exhibition and events programme that draws on collections and shares the experience of community, campaigners, scientists and policymakers to explore the issue of air pollution historically and today in Manchester. What I'm trying to give a sense of is the commitment to environmental and social action locally, and the scope, depth and accelerating pace of inequality are really shaping what we do and our sense of the difference we can make. Okay, so now I'm going to share my second example, which in many ways is very, very different. probably my favourite image from the museum in the last 5 years. This embrace at the heart of the museum was between the daughter of an anthropologist who'd collected material we repatriated, and Amathea, one of the artists and community representatives from the Anandiliakwa community who received the material. UNESCO, who've been really vocal supporters of this repatriation, said the following: "The return of objects was not a transaction, but a collaboration, a dialogue, a project fueled by empathy, trust, and love." We think maybe we need more empathy, trust, and love in our museums. For many years in Manchester, we've considered the return of collections not as a loss, but as an act of repair and healing that gives communities and indeed museums new purpose, strength, and relevance. We worked collaboratively with the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies and the Anandiliakwa Land Council over a 3-year period, including on country, to determine where these 174 items should live and could best inspire future generations. And from the outset, a commitment to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples underpinned the process. But this return was more than the movement of objects. It was a reconnection. Led by elders, the repatriation process revitalised cultural knowledge and practices, strengthening intergenerational ties. But you don't need to hear from me. You need to hear from them. This is a clip from the on-country celebrations on Groote Island in North Australia.
Really special day for us, for Anandiliakwa people from Groote Island, because our repatriation has came back from Manchester Museum, so we're just doing a celebrating, and we're happy, we're proud, because the artifacts came back to where it belongs.
Many of our families, especially our old people, are feeling quite emotional to see those beautiful reminders of family members who are long past returning back here where they belong.
I saw my dad's stuff came back to Rhode Island, and I'm really happy to see everything for my dad. I feel proud, happy for the stuff came back to me, for my children, grandchildren, so they can see it for future.
Yeah, I've always thought in caring for the past, we're staking a claim really on what matters in the future. The Anandiliakwa people have long passed down their stories, traditions, and artistry through generations. And now this rich cultural heritage is celebrated in a new permanent exhibition just opened in Manchester. Come visit, called Stories from Country. It's curated by Anandiliakwa Arts, and it's ensuring that their voices remain present and heard within the museum. Through their own words, art and traditions, they share the stories of identity, belonging, and resilience, and we have much to learn. An awareness of the return material has already unlocked a rich cultural history and inspired an art practice of shell doll making. These are a couple of the what are called daddy kwa shell dolls that you see here. Traditionally used to teach literacy, kinship, and ancestral wisdom, these dolls are considered living entities, carrying the spirits of ancestors and guiding those who interact with them. When the delegation visited in 2023 to reclaim their cultural belongings, they gifted a set of daddy kwa to the museum with one essential condition of care. The dolls must come off display once a year to be played with. So over Easter, families in Manchester joined in this tradition, ensuring these cultural objects remain spiritually active. My colleague, Alexandra Alberta, our curator of Indigenous perspectives, asked Nolene, one of the Anandiliakwa artists, what happens if they get broken? And Nolene just turned to her and said, well, they're toys, they're going to be. And Alex smiled and said, I love that, because for the daddy kwa, you need to see more wear on them in order to see they've been cared for. Year after year, you're going to see how they change, and you're going to see how much love they have. Across the museum, we've discussed how this shifts our thinking. You can imagine the conversation I've had with curatorial colleagues, absolutely fascinating, and how we work. And I think it probably reflects what we're trying to do: collaboration, care, and the power of cultural belongings to connect people across generations and continents. As we expressed at that Sarawak ceremony in the Lilling on Saturday, together, we move forwards together. Thanks.
That's really great always to hear how this has moved the practices of the museum and towards empathy, love, and continue transforming the way you work with collections. We'll invite Richard Piaccentini, I guess it's a recording video, right, from the Phipps and Conservatory and Botanical Garden from the US, and then we can hear Jenny right after. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richard Piaccentini, President and CEO of Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, and thank you for inviting me today to speak with you about our experience using regenerative design at Phipps. Phipps Conservatory is located in the city of Pittsburgh in the upper northeast section of the United States. Our original conservatory opened in 1893 as a gift to the city of Pittsburgh from Henry Phipps. It was created at a time when people thought there was no limit to the amount of pollution we can produce or the amount of natural resources we can use. In fact, many people thought we were going to conquer nature. Unfortunately, today, most of us realize that that's not true. The city ran the conservatory for 100 years, and then after the steel industry collapsed in the region, they realized they could no longer afford to run it, so they spun it off to a nonprofit organization. One of the first things we did when we took over was then to start to work on developing a master plan with the primary purpose of improving visitor amenities and replacing some of our dilapidated facilities. The first building we built was our new visitor center, and ended up being the first LEED certified visitor center in a public garden, and we were pretty excited about that. LEED is the predominant green building certification program in the United States today. We then went on to build new production greenhouses and a new tropical forest display conservatory, both of which are very energy efficient compared to traditional types of glass houses. We then set our sights on the lower public works yard behind our campus, where we were going to build our new education, research, and administration building. And right before we got started, we heard about this new program that came out called the Living Building Challenge, and it's the most rigorous green building standard in the world today. And it's based on regenerative thinking. And it requires buildings to be net zero energy and net zero water and free from toxic chemicals. And then there's a whole series of other strict requirements that are required in order to meet full certification. Our Center for Sustainable Landscapes met that certification, Living Building Challenge, and when it opened in December of 2012, and it was our first zero energy building. It also met 5 other very high certification standards for building, human, and environmental health. In 2015, we opened a new modular classroom that was PETAL certified under the Living Building Challenge, and it became our second zero energy building. In 2018, we renovated the old Public Works building as the Living Building Challenge building, and that became our third zero energy building. When we talk about regenerative thinking at Phipps, we like to refer to the work that was done by Carol Sanford. And she talks about these 4 different paradigms of how we can interact with the world. And the first paradigm is the extractive model. In this model, people see the world as fragments there for the taking. And they don't think about, or maybe they don't care about, who they hurt or what they hurt in the process. As long as they get theirs, they're happy. This is how most of our societies work today. The second model she talks about is called the less bad model. In this model, people still see the world as fragments, but now they're trying to stabilize them, and they're trying to do less damage. This is where the environmental movement started. The third model is called the do-good model. In this model, people still see the world as fragments, but now they're trying to make them better, and they're trying to improve things. The fourth model is called the regenerative model. In this model, people recognize that everything on this planet is interconnected, And anything you do anywhere to anything is going to affect everything else on the planet. And it's about us, and it's recognizing that we're in relationships. We're in relationships with each other species, and everything else on the planet. So that the work what we do should be to recognize those relationships and help to evolve the capacity of everyone and everything to be the best that they can be. Now, we like to use regenerative thinking when we build our buildings, but we also use it to guide our programs and operations as well. For example, here you can see some work we've done related to sustainability over the last 20 years, including things like using 100% renewable electricity campus-wide, building 3 zero-energy buildings, divesting from fossil fuels, reducing plastics, among many other different initiatives. We also like to use a number of different frameworks to guide our thinking. One of them we use quite often is called 3 lines of work. In this model, if you can imagine a person starting a new organization, they'd be at the first line of work, and we'd expect them to become proficient in their particular job that they were hired for. But we also expect them to work at the second line, which means we expect them to work effectively with members of their team, and those teams with other teams and other departments within the organization, so that the organization can meet its mission and goals. But the third line work is the work that we think is the most important, and that is recognizing where can we have an impact on the greater whole, where can we have an impact on the community. And that community can be at a number of different levels. It can be at the local, national, or international level. We think this is really important, and whenever one of our staff members proposes a new initiative or a new program, one of the first questions we often ask is, what is the third line? Now, we see this third line work as a great opportunity for us in the museum field. You know, if you think about the fact that there are over 50,000 museums in the world today, we reach hundreds of millions of visitors each year. We're some of the most trusted organizations in each of our communities. This presents us with a huge leadership opportunity to lead on important issues like climate change. There was a study that was done by AAM back in 2022, where they asked frequent museum goers, do they think their institution should be talking about climate change? And the majority of frequent visitors said that they actually felt that their museum should be talking about climate change, and it didn't matter what type of museum it was. And if this is one of the reasons why we started the Climate Toolkit, to create an opportunity for museums to share, mentor, and learn from each other on how to aggressively address climate change, and then to use that as an opportunity to lead by example to inspire their members and visitors. The Climate Toolkit is endorsed by a number of different national and international associations, and is divided into 9 major categories. And within those categories, there are 33 different goals that you can follow to help you to address climate change. To date, 233 institutions from 26 different countries have joined the toolkit, and are actively working together to address climate change. Now, it would be very easy for people to use the toolkit as a checklist, or maybe even a contest. It's not a contest, that's not the point. Or maybe you could look at it from a less bad or do good paradigm. But ultimately, what we do hope people will do is look at it from a regenerative point of view. That's where the greatest impact can happen. It's really important for you to understand what is unique about your institution, what is unique about your community, your culture, your country. Where can you find that nodal point where it makes the most sense for you to be addressing climate change? And that ultimately is what we hope to be able to help people find, the best place where they can be addressing climate change based on their own unique situation. I'd like to close by reading this quote from Josie Warden that I think really does a great job explaining regenerative thinking. She says, a regenerative mindset is one that sees the world as built around reciprocal and co-evolutionary relationships, where humans, other living beings, and ecosystems rely on one another for health and shape, and are shaped by their connections with one another. I think that's a really great example of what we mean when we talk about regenerative thinking. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions on the panel.
Thank you. Richard will join us for the questions. So if you have questions for him, as you can see also, each of them have a different approach to regenerative thinking. And the Climate Toolkit membership, it's a free membership, so there is an opportunity for you to learn more. And there's an article from Richard on the latest book from Nick Merriman as well on museums and the climate crisis. So Jenny is also a colleague of mine in the ICOM Sustain. She's also part of the board. Please welcome.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here. Yes, great. Thanks so much for the invitation and the support for getting here. Thank you to the Conference Working Party and all of you who've helped to make that, to get us all together. I'm really honoured to be included on this panel. I'm a bit of a fangirl of these people, so it's great to be able to be here with you all to learn and be inspired by all the great work that's already going on and really see what we can do together to ramp it up. So I'm Jenny Newell. I'm the Curator for Climate Change at the Australian Museum. And I just want to acknowledge that the Australian Museum was built nearly 200 years ago on the land of the Gadigal. The Gadigal had cared for that country. They're kin with the living things there, the rocks, the air and the water, and they lived in a relationship of mutual care for tens of thousands of years. They are still living in the area, but we really need to make sure that we're learning from the Gadigal and other First Nations people, really learning from that deep knowledge and respect for country now as a matter of urgency. I'd also like to acknowledge any Indigenous people in the audience today and online. So the Australian Museum has a vision to commit to transforming the conversation around climate change, the environment and wildlife conservation. We also commit to be a strong advocate for First Nations culture. And the Climate Solutions Centre is an important way that this mission is advanced. The Climate Solutions Centre that I run is a group that helps us to really help people understand climate change and take action to grapple with the climate and ecological crises, the greatest challenges of our times, and to see pathways for ourselves to action. So our strapline is Powerful Stories for Positive Futures. And you can see some examples here of some of the things we do. We've got exhibitions, events, we run media and digital resources. And there's three of us in the Climate Solutions Centre. Madison Carras is the project officer, Frederick Soltre is our research scientist, with a joint appointment with the University of Technology, Sydney. And we have an advisory group, we have experts in climate solutions. We're very fortunate to have this very exalted group with us. We also have visiting students from time to time and volunteers. We have collaborations with externals, and importantly, we work collaboratively within the museum with our in-house teams, so exhibitions and digital programs, and our First Nations team. And so it's really, these sorts of collaborations are how we do the work that we do. We work not only with our First Nations team, but also with external First Nations experts for most of our productions. So whether it's opening up key learnings for our audiences through exhibitions or it's the events that we're running, but they're really helping us to open up recognition that we are intimately a part of nature, of country, and that caring for country is everybody's responsibility. We always make sure that all Indigenous knowledge sharing is carried out very respectfully and that it's managed by those knowledge holders, so it's not an extractive colonial process anymore. We're making sure that we're properly acknowledging all those knowledge holders and that everything is managed with an Indigenous cultural intellectual property licence and with fair payment. The Climate Solutions Centre also helps to communicate out the Australian Museum research scientists' work. So instead of it being just very much an in-house gathering of new insights into ways that we're witnessing climate impacts on biodiversity, species distribution changes and all those other impacts, we're also able to flag up the kinds of things that are going on behind the museum's walls, but also the citizen science that's happening. There's a wonderful project I always love to showcase, which is called Frog ID, and our herpetologists get so much amazing data, a really huge amount of data, from all the incredible numbers of people around Australia who are signing up to Frog ID. You download an app, it's a bit like Shazam for frogs, and so it tells you, our herpetologists are there listening to all these recordings of frogs, and they're able to identify frogs because of that. And it's really a wonderful way for the public to get out there and observe and get connected to their environment just around them and to understand their animal neighbours much more effectively. And we're just being able to see so much so much more about what's happening with frogs in Australia. So we've got these baselines. It meant that when the fires came through, our scientists were able to say, okay, so this is what's happened to the populations in those areas, which they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So it's really important we're able to track the impacts of rising heat and other climate impacts. So I'd like to talk to you just quickly about the methods that we have here at the Climate Solutions Centre, so how we are supporting regenerative practices in Australian communities and ecologies. So I'll give you just a quick overview of some of the things that we're doing, and hopefully some of these are inspiring and maybe replicable, I would hope. And at the end, I'll give you a quick case study of an exhibition where all these things come together. So we have 3 actions that really support our regenerative practice, and you can see here that's listening, sharing stories, and sharing tools for action. So just to dig into those a little bit more. Listening, we're really looking at listening to people who've got broad experiences of climate change and climate solutions. So that includes different cultural communities, people who are really on the front line, particularly Pacific Islanders. We've got First Nations people, of course, as you've already heard, who we're listening to. And there's lots of different community groups in Sydney, where the museum is, but also out in rural areas, regional New South Wales, and farming communities. It's really important for us to be able to understand the different types of climate experiences people are having, and really learning from these people and their experiences, and us understanding people's values, like what's really important to them, what their priorities are, and understanding which messages and which messengers are going to be effective for connecting to these different groups. So, and actually the other thing which is really great about doing this listening practice is that we're meeting people where they are. We're able to build relationships and better understand their needs. The listening we do isn't only face-to-face, we're also tapping into broad brush social research, which listens to large numbers of people. So, for instance, the Climate Compass is one that we rely on, where there's surveys carried out every couple of years, and they talk to about 3,500 people each time, and they're really tracking the changes in relationships to climate change over time in Australia. So we're able to sort of see how many people are concerned and alarmed. These are our standard audience that we normally reach. They're the sorts of people who come to the museum and who want to access our content. But then also the numbers of people who are more cautious and disengaged, and that's the audience that I'm really trying to meet, and it's certainly the more challenging audience to reach. So it's important for us to be looking at how we share our stories and making sure that these are as captivating as possible. They're going to be meeting those audiences with their different needs and different interests. We're sharing stories of people who are advancing solutions, and we're making sure that we're translating those into really strong storytelling. We're putting out vibrant exhibitions and lots of talks that are either large-scale talks like orations and so on, but also small-scale talks in schools and in other places. We're creating videos where people get to hear from people who are making really substantial changes where they are to create better futures. And we're having those videos available either online or within exhibitions, just really communicating those compelling voices. And we do know from feedback that this kind of storytelling about where we are and how we can make things better in the face of deep challenges is really helping to inform, inspire and empower our audiences to see how they can step up in similar ways and see how they too can take action to regenerate their communities and their environments. We're also finding out what the pitfalls are and what's gone wrong and what not to do, so that people aren't reinventing the wheel. So the programs we run are helping give people tools for action. These are often practical tools, but also about building confidence to step up to action, not just at home, but also in the community and in the broader world. One effective way we do this is with our Coffee and Climate program. It's a monthly guided conversation program, a safe space for people to share and learn and leave with more reasons for hope. And there's a different theme every month, so I'll give people some key bits of information. It might be that we're now at 46% of renewable energy in the Australian grid, which is often people go, really? They hadn't known that, and that makes a big difference to have that kind of foundational knowledge. We don't often hear about the good news stories around climate change in Australia. I don't know if it's the same here, but it's one of those things that's a really important role for us to fill. Otherwise, people think that it's fine for us to try and flip over to nuclear instead, which is our Conservative opposition leader is trying to get us to do at the moment. So so in a conversation like the Coffee and Climate program, we help people to have small conversations as well, using these Q&A sort of starter cards with questions and answers on them as little conversation starters. We also put out brochures about what's going on locally with permaculture or food co-ops or library of things. And we can really see this working. It's really successful. We get people coming back and they tell us about the changes that they've been making. They've just gone out and bought an EV that they weren't going to be buying otherwise. And so all these sorts of things really help us to see that through these programs we're actually supporting people to get the information and the motivation they need and the confidence they need to take action. We always suggest through our programs that if you want to take action, you can most effectively do this by, first of all, one, raising your voice. Talking to those around you is one of the most influential things you can do. And we know that family and friends find that that the most important information they're getting is from you, just the people who are closest to them. And how important it is to also speak to your leaders and be writing letters and making calls. We encourage people to join a group. Collectives are the best way to upscale your personal power. And I like the point that George Monbiot makes, that we are hardwired to work in collectives. And we also like to show that that transition is already underway, that there's already 1.2 million, or between 1 and 2 million organisations working on all aspects of the climate crisis, as Paul Holken has found. And this is the biggest social movement the world has ever seen. There are so many groups around us. For whatever your interests, there's going to be a group there for you. We also help people to look into practical skills, whether it's staying safe in heat waves or stepping up to learn about clothing repair, as we did in one of our Climate Solutions Saturday programs recently. So as a demonstration of all our methods, I just wanted to quickly walk you through our exhibition, Future Now, which is an exhibition of dioramas, which is a touring exhibition, and just talk to you a little bit about the ways this works. So it's an exhibition that talks to people about how we can create good places to live in now and into the future, and that we have everything we need now to create a future we want. One that's regenerative, it's supporting nature, supporting communities to be resilient, and it's giving us clean energy, clean transport, really reducing emissions and helping us achieve a safer climate future. It's bringing in easily accessible information based on listening to the priorities and questions of people, particularly those who are climate cautious and disengaged. So it travels to where these people are mostly, so out of the centre of the city and out to shopping centres in suburban areas, out to libraries. And we don't flag up climate change up front at the top of the exhibition. It's just called Future Now. You can see information about climate change further down at that lower level, where you've got the label rails and you can see there's some diagrams there and explanations. But really what we're talking about is the ways that we can create safe places to live in, ways of saving money, reducing pollution of air and water. These are all values that we know are really important to people in the climate cautious and disengaged audience segments. We talk about ways of building stronger communities, staying safe in heat waves and other dangerous weather events. We present knowledge from experts, including First Nations elders. And, for instance, here we're explaining the practice of care of country, such as cultural burning, and we use short text on the label rail to explain some of that using words from those experts. And you can see it's all dioramas. People love dioramas, so it's really inspiring and exciting for everyone to see all these tiny little things that they can come and look into and look for all the animals in the landscape and find all these little people doing things. We also have a new Future Now Makers video series, which enables us to have surrounding stories. So we listen to regenerative farmer, we listen to a conservation biologist, a First Nations conservation biologist, some young women who've started up a climate writers group, so you can come along and learn how to write to politicians effectively. We also speak to a river keeper and a community solar project manager. So these are really important stories. People can also look into the detail of the dioramas and see people regenerating mangroves and greening our cities and greening the city here, looking at native plantings and points like how important it is to keep your cat indoors so they stop eating all the wildlife, how important it is to have community gardens, repair cafes. There's even an extreme weather shelter there. So helping people to sort of see the sorts of things that are going to be good for us now and into the future as our places get hotter and more difficult to live in, with more unnatural disasters. So the great thing about dioramas is that they're really captivating and accessible, good for people who are visual learners, and they support those who can't read English or who aren't reading yet. We also have language provision on our website, so all the text of the exhibition is there in 4 languages, and you can get access to that from a QR code on the exhibition itself. We also like to help people with that sort of architecture for imagination and helping people to see ways that we can construct futures that are good to live in despite the challenges we'll be having, so we can still maintain some sort of good quality of life, working together and really regenerating our places in our communities. We have conducted audience research along the various locations where the exhibition has gone to, and it's been touring now for 2 years, and it's always performed really well in surveys, and a recent exit survey showed that visitors to Future Now rated it, 84% of them rated it as good or excellent, a large portion of them rating it as excellent, which is fabulous. Over 2 in 5 said it inspired them to strongly think about how current decisions will shape the future. And 4 in 5 said that they learnt something new, particularly about conservation, First Nations land management, and how to live a sustainable life. So we're really ticking all our boxes. The qualitative data we're getting back is also fabulous. I love to hear when people are saying, "Oh, I'd love to live here. I wish I was small so I could live here." So it's really wonderful. It's just the kind of inspiration we'd hoped the models would give people. And my favourite moment was when a young man out in Western Sydney said, "Oh, I love this place. I'm going to fight for my place to be like this." He really wanted to see that, he could see that this town was the sort of town he wanted to live in, and that he was going to do something to make his place like that. So I think we're kicking all our own goals. It's fabulous. We're really pleased that that's all working with that exhibition. So in conclusion, there are great potentials and great responsibilities for museums to step up to sharing stories about solutions and sharing tools to support the transition to help our communities be more resilient. A lot of this work can be done on a very tight budget and through collaborations. I recommend going out and pulling together the collectives of fellow museum staff and other superheroes that you need to help each other upskill on climate communications and engagement, ramp up your creativity, and let's get regenerating. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. I guess we have Richard on the screen. If you could join us. And also we'll be collecting questions from the audience. And of course, we had prepared pre-questions if we don't, but I think they'll get excited to have this 15 minutes conversation if you want. I think you got a sense that regeneration is very much place-based. And one of the main concepts is that it's very hard for us to think about regenerating the planet. It's too abstract. So when we hear Australian case, and when we hear Manchester, and also we hear the situation there at the Phipps, they care about what is degenerative, recognize as degeneration the territory, and hear the people who are doing, the doers, right? And getting a sense of what can be regenerate, so people understand that the actions matter, and the actions actually can revert, reverse the damage that has been caused for so many years. So I think this is very important to point out the place potential and the place source solutions that they have been trying to gather together. I will do a quick question before anyone can then raise your hands. I think one thing that when the South Asian Gallery also came about, and the Unsettled project. So throughout your narratives, you also bring a notion of what is happening in the territory. So you spoke a lot about the methods. It would be nice to hear also from Richard and from Esme how you have mapped the territory and create a notion of what is degenerated there, but also create a sense of community for what you are presenting, what you are creating there, that it's not necessarily just imposed in terms of the narratives, but you're co-creating and bringing the voices that are acting And one thing that is the mix match between the environmentalists and the curators together to create a common sense, a common knowledge that it's the language of the museums, but it's still very much rooted in the social-ecological fabric of the city. So welcome, Richard. Just to hear you and Esme about this first question of how you have mapped, also define your priorities, right? It sounds like it's a big thing, climate change solutions on the territory when you first start, but by the time you map it, how you set the priorities and define who is going to be on board for the project. So Esme and Richard, please.
Okay, shall I try and go first? Well, actually, rather than focus in on that, so I'm struggling with the question, and I'll be honest, partly because we're not trying to map the climate partners who are out there necessarily. I mean, we did try. I'm looking at Hannah. We did try, didn't we, Hannah? It was a bit of a nightmare. We spent a long time during COVID trying to get a sense. We tried to create a map, to open it up, to understand. And you know what? They change every single month. One amazing project would happen and then that would disappear. Actually, the energy instead, I think, is going into trying to understand the invitation that the museum offers. So you mentioned the South Asia Gallery. I'll just give a brief flavour. So we have a South Asia Gallery. We opened it a couple of years ago. It was co-curated on a pretty epic scale, but originally it was going to be a kind of professionally curated chronological history of South Asia. Actually, that didn't feel right. We knew that across Greater Manchester there are phenomenal people, communities, all of South Asian diaspora who care deeply about this heritage and telling this story. So, frankly, we stopped that project and we hosted a big meal. All these people we consulted with, we just, it was so much fun. We got, there were 120 of us at a really great place in East Manchester that does really good Asian food. They really supported it. And we said, you know, what if we did this together? What would it look like? And I would love to say that there was a really wonderful costed timescale plan, but you know what, there wasn't. Actually, what we wanted is we wanted to bring together that convening a coalition of the willing. What we were clear about was our invitation. We want this to be a space where you share what you care about, and our role and our curatorial and our role in all of this is to create the conditions and support you to enable you to do that. And then frankly, these things take on a life of their own. So they build a momentum. So actually, having done that, now we might be in a position to start mapping some of these groups. But of course, it's led us to people we would never have worked with, to stories we would never have found. And I think that's part of it. Similarly with the top floor, you know, I don't know whether we're now in a position to do a really great map of Greater Manchester. What we're interested in are the relationships that exist between people and places and getting our invitation right so that when those partners might come to the museum for an event or to at the weekend with their kids or whatever it might be, they understand there's an invitation for them there to be part of something bigger, that sense of collective endeavour. Yeah. I've really not answered that question.
That's perfect. It's perfect. Richard, do you want to come in? Welcome.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. The first project that comes to my mind for your question, Lucimara, is our Youth Climate Advocacy Committee. And when we first started to think about how can we get young people involved, how can we support what they're doing, rather than coming up with a program where we would tell young people what they should be doing, we decided to ask them, what do you want to do? How can we help you? So our whole basis of the program is to try and help young people accomplish what they think they need to accomplish related to climate change. And then we started to look out to the other museums through our climate toolkit and ask them if they have youth groups that they'd like to connect to our youth group. And if they didn't have a youth group, we would help them start a youth group, because the ultimate goal here is to help museums around the country and around the world engage young people in their communities and then connect these young people together so that they can share stories. and things that they're doing to address climate change.
That's perfect. Before I invite Jenny to come in, I want to see if the audience has questions. I think it's a good time for bringing you in. There's a question there to join the conversation. You can just say your name and where you're coming from, and then just a question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tiva. I run a collective program in London for institutions that are working to accelerate their progress towards net zero and H positive future. It's a really knotty question. Co-creation, collaboration, collective working is critical to make sure that we are doing a really good job of bringing everybody with us in this challenge. It's also the most urgent challenge we've ever faced. And we know that these kinds of approaches, collective approaches, take time. How do we reconcile the two? Does the panel have any top tips for us for how we do this quickly but collaboratively?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my suggestion is we just take this on the one as well, Katie, and then I hand it to Janie.
Oh, thank you very much. Nicholas Watts, Commonwealth Association of Museums. And Richard mentioned gardens, museums and zoos all in one breath, and I think we see the way they come together in Phipps. And I'm aware of Manchester Museum breeding endangered Panama frogs in the museum, which has to be a zoo job. Well,
we've got a zoo license.
Yeah, thank you. But the Botanical Gardens Conservation International, BGCI, has recommended that the three Botanic Gardens, museums and zoos work together at community level to promote biodiversity awareness and climate awareness and research. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about how we can best find out what's going on in those three areas and how we can promote cooperation, collaboration, coordination across these three institutions at community level, which have to have a joint and shared interest. And I just wonder if we're doing as much as we could, and I would love to see that happen across the Commonwealth. Thank you.
So Jenny, please.
Great, fantastic.
Oh, do you need to?
Questions?
Is it?
Is that? There we go. That's better. Thanks. Fantastic questions. Thank you. Yes, so I think how we open up those really inclusive stories, those ones that are opening up the doors. Yeah, maybe there's like an open day that happens at the zoo, and there's people from the museum there as well as from the Botanic Gardens, and they're coming together to tell those powerful stories about the actions that are going on. That perhaps there's joined up projects like the sorts of things that happen between with breeding programs in different places, and those stories getting told in together, I think is really important. You can then reach those broad audiences on one spot. And I think similarly with trying to advance those collaborations, it's how do we get the stories really condensed and told in ways that will pull people in and really get them galvanised. So finding ways of finding those moments in the year's calendar where you can go out there and say, this is what we're doing. If you want to come on board, come on now. I guess also to bring in slightly some of the initial question you had for us, Lucimara, when we were setting up the Climate Solutions Centre, we went out to some rural towns and asked them, these farming communities in a town hall forum, what is it that a Climate Solutions Centre could do for you? And they said, well, actually, it's this whole convening idea. It's really how can you enable us to connect up to other communities who are wanting to do climate work or, pull in, start up a community solar project. We want to learn from the others who have done that sort of thing so we're not making the same mistakes. And so it's how can our institutions work most effectively, most quickly to provide those kinds of links between the people who are doing the good work. And we've been looking into some sort of interactive map. I mean, you've all been talking about maps here, and I think it's really interesting to hear about your experience in trying to map what's out there. But if we have something that groups are putting up their own, you're uploading into one of those like WeMap functions that ICOM have used in the past. Upload your own project, and suddenly people can search what's going on in their own area, and they can look at particular themes, who's working on a community solar project, and that really enables those links very quickly and easily in that place-based visual kind of way. That could be one way of advancing these collaborations that we need, because you're right. I mean, they do take time, and they need the time, and they need the cups of tea and the time to sit with each other and really make those intimate connections that you need really happen. You can't always rush those. And if you're working with First Nations communities, you've absolutely got to go with their time scale, and the institutional one rarely fits with that, but you just have to make the time and the space, and you have to slow everything down. I know it's so hard when you've got that real urgency pressing you. Yeah, but thanks for thinking it through.
I love that question about the urgency, and frankly feel it very deeply. But now is the time. Yes, okay, so it takes time. All really great things do. And we reap what we sow. So a little bit of me thinks we just need to... one of the things I love about being in Manchester is there's a real sense of you roll your sleeves up and you get on with it. And it will always take longer than you think it will. It will probably cost more than you think it will, although often this is about building relationships. This is about an investment of time and love and care. And the reason I slightly bridled at the mapping thing was partly there's also a little bit of something around us trying to control what's happening or trying to grasp what's happening. Actually, much more usefully, certainly for us, we currently have an exhibition called Wild, which is very relevant to all of this. It's about the relationship we have as part of nature and our understanding and connection to nature and notion of the wild. But actually, probably one of my favourite elements of the exhibition, we have a changing area at the end, a room, and within that, every season, a new partner who we are working with in some way comes in and shares their work. So we had Black Girls Hike, share their amazing work. We've currently got In Our Nature, all of these wonderful action programmes across the city. But actually, as you leave the exhibition, we just have a huge notice board. And we just, Hannah has so many connections with incredible, as do other colleagues, with incredible organisations all over the city. They just advertise what's going on. And actually, it's not a hard thing to do. So I do think it's interesting, though, in relation to the question to zoos, I think we are very disconnected. A few weeks ago, I was in Chester talking to a zoo conference. And the first thing that struck me is literally knew nobody in the room. And it was a conference of educators and leaders, and they were just so much of what they were grappling with was the same issues, but we are very, very disconnected. So I think there's real work to do there.
Richard, if you can add to your point.
Yes, that was a great question, Nicholas, and that's actually the whole idea behind the Climate Toolkit, is to bring together gardens, museums, and zoos to share information with each other. When you think about it, we share a lot of the same opportunities, a lot of the same problems, so why not share the solutions that we come up with together? And so the whole idea behind the Climate Toolkit is to allow people to put out there what they're doing, and so that nobody has to reinvent the wheel. There's probably somebody doing something similar to what you want to do already. And the Climate Toolkit is designed so that you could sort by all these different criteria, whether it be energy, water, food, transportation, whatever, or even by bioregions. You could find people on other sides of the world that are in similar types of climatic conditions that you have. I think the more we can share with each other, the more we can recognize that we have, similar opportunities and problems, the better off we're going to be, and the quicker we're going to get to the solutions we need.
That's great. So I hope we have learned together through this panel, and also you can contact through not only them, but the staff that are in these museums, because I think you have created a very good journey for all your staff members in terms of having socio-ecological lens on everything you have been doing. And regardless if it's a zoo, if it is a botanical garden, if it's a place, One thing that we usually say in the regenerative movement, that universities, schools, museums, we should be all together for regenerating the territory, and it goes beyond the museum, doesn't it? And museums become just a channel for regeneration, and they're all regenerative agents in the same territory, sharing a view that this place can be regenerated for sustainable futures. So I would like to thank you all for being here. And we're going to have a break. The Christian will come here, so we'll continue this conversation on the break. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucimara, Esme, Jenny, and Richard. We're going to continue these, as Lucimara says. We've created plenty of opportunities to continue these discussions and conversations. We're going to have a 20-minute break now.